Hello and welcome to Fowl Plays, where we look at tales of tabletop tragedy that are sure to ruffle some feathers. I'm your host, Boss Goose, and in today's story we have a pair of brothers, one who is seemingly obsessed with their character's pectoral muscles as he takes every opportunity to describe the magnificence of his chest, and the other who plays an anime-style Catgirl with the weebiest of voices. Together they completely shift the tone of the dark fantasy setting the campaign is based in, and create many awkward moments for the party, until they push it too far with an extra graphic scene and get chewed out by the DM. Before that though, it's time for a game of Catgirl or Cat Squirrel, the rules of which are as follows. There's a rustling in the bushes over there, and we're about to be ambushed by either an anime Catgirl or a ferocious Cat Squirrel, and it's up to you to guess which one. So go ahead and make your choice in 3, 2, 1, and it turns out it was a Catgirl, and as long as you don't let her call you master, we should be safe. And if you chose Cat Squirrel, don't worry, the beast can be tamed by hitting that subscribe button, which will give you updates whenever new D&D stories are available on my channel, as well as an ever-growing backlog of existing videos that will keep you and your new furry companion entertained for hours. Now, without any further delays, take your seats and wet your beaks as we dive on into today's tale. So around 2 months ago, I submitted this. You don't have to read the whole thing, but TLDR, back in high school, I was convinced by my friends to narrate a sort of rules-light storytelling RPG for them. Everything was going well until one of my friends, who I'll keep referring to by his former WoW username, LoverboyXXX, because I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old, brought along his long-distance girlfriend to our sessions. For some reason, she became obsessed with an NPC of mine, and pretty much blackmailed me, using my friend's mental health in order to force, among other things, a relationship between our characters. As I mentioned in that story, Loverboy and I recently reconnected. Unlike myself, he never stopped being interested in RPGs ever since our group fell apart years ago, and is now an avid D&D player and an occasional DM. Pertaining to the latter, some time ago he asked me to help him build a world of his own, since some of the people he regularly played with had expressed interest in a more narrative-driven campaign. This will be another lengthy one, so brace yourself, dear reader, as I regale you with the thrilling tale of Ben, the brooding brandisher of beefy breasts, and his accomplice Cody, the Catgirl connoisseur. Potentially not safe for work content ahead. You have been warned. It all began one gloomy Sunday evening. My dear friend, Loverboy, invited me to a Discord call with his wayward band of eager adventurers. Since, let's face it, I'll be the one doing most of the world building, I wanted to gather everyone's input as to what kind of story they were looking to experience. I already had a few settings in mind, but I figured that it might be a good idea to gauge the group's interest beforehand. I'd like to think that I have a knack for world building, hence why Loverboy wanted to include me. But it tends to take me longer than most people to actually write all my ideas down, partially due to English being my second language, and also other factors outside my control that I don't really feel like specifying. The point being that I didn't want to spend time developing a world nobody wants. 4 of the 5 players were actually incredibly nice to me, and I quickly understood why Loverboy liked playing with these people. That is, with the exception of one, the aforementioned Ben, not his real name. See, while the rest of the group wanted a medieval high fantasy setting, Ben insisted on it being set in the modern world, under the pretense that he was tired of, I quote, swords and dragons and shit. Now, don't get me wrong. Personally, I sort of get where he was coming from. But instead of respectfully voicing his opinion, he came across as a stubborn, petulant child that talked over anyone who suggested a compromise. Cody, also a made-up name, who was his brother, was initially on the majority side, but was quickly pressured by Ben into changing his tune. For context, everyone involved is in their early to late 20s. Were it not for Loverboy chiming in and telling them both to essentially shut the fuck up and let everyone else talk, I would have left the call then and there. We eventually found a middle ground and settled on a story set in a fictional version of Victoria-era London, with elements of dark fantasy and eldritch horror, a la Bloodborne. The group played a special unit of half-monster hybrids who were artificially created for the sole purpose of hunting down other monsters. For example, the Defanged were humans voluntarily afflicted with a heavily refined version of vampirism that grants them most of the benefits of being a full-blooded vampire, but makes it so they only crave the blood of other afflicted creatures, ensuring that once their purpose is fulfilled, they'd essentially starve to death. I took everyone's suggestions and conceptualized several other races and factions that all follow a similar philosophy, then spent the following week compiling the world's lore while also keeping it loose enough so that Loverboy could easily fill in the blanks with his own ideas, and then presented it to the group the following weekend. Almost everyone, including Ben, seemed pretty happy with the result. All that was left now was for Loverboy to integrate the actual game mechanics into the setting. Cody, however, was not completely sold on the idea yet. He was usually far meeker compared to his older brother, and only spoke his opinion if it echoed Ben's. Not this time, for you see, dear reader, in my conviction to create a consistently gritty and oppressive atmosphere, I had neglected to account for something. A cornerstone of every successful RPG. But what about Catgirls? So, yeah, to reiterate, Cody really, and I mean really, wanted to play as a Catgirl. Not sure why he didn't say anything during the initial call, but regardless, now he was dead set on it. He hinted that he wouldn't participate if he couldn't be one. My friend was about to shoot the idea down and let Cody walk, and in hindsight, I probably should have let him, but being the diplomatic doormat that I am, I said that we could probably conceive of something close to his ideal character that also fit with the setting. After all, we already had werewolves whose entire shtick was morphing only certain parts of their anatomy to get an edge in battle without going completely feral. It wasn't that far of a stretch, right? Behold the mother of all asspoles, the Nekomata, a supernatural species loosely inspired by our world's yokai equivalent, entities and spirits in Japanese folklore. Unlike lycanthropes, the Nekomata started off as just normal cats that were changed into half-human hybrids through some sort of Eastern occult magic. In addition to aesthetic traits, such as the obligatory cat ears and tail, they possess the weapons, senses, and agility of cats, with little to no drawbacks. However, if they are to stray even slightly from the edicts of their highly spiritual sect, they'd be reverted back to regular animals. The concept wasn't great, but it was good enough. So far you could probably tell that we were going for a sort of Suicide Squad kind of vibe. Ideally, it would have been up to the players to decide whether they wanted to blindly follow orders or to work together to find some sort of loophole in their design and turn on their handlers. All of this was, of course, discussed with the group, and they absolutely loved the idea. Even Cody was inspired, now that he could be his true weeby self. I've got no room to judge, considering that I was the one who made it possible. From here on out, my involvement in the campaign's progress was negligible, so most of what I'm about to tell you is from my friend's perspective as the DM. I have no reason to doubt him, but I figured I should mention that for the sake of transparency. The party was gathered at an abandoned inn outside of town, where they were briefed by their handler regarding their upcoming mission. They were to hunt down a group of cultists sulking around the sewers and stop them from summoning some sort of Lovecraftian creature with mind-altering abilities. They were given one in-game day to choose their equipment and prepare, aka establish their classes and roleplay amongst themselves. Loverboy apparently wanted all the introductions out of the way first, before the plot properly kicked in. Ben was playing a defanged male duelist named Maximilian with a tragic backstory, whom he described as tall, muscular, fair, handsome, and crucially, wearing a leather harness that emphasized his broad, bare chest. Already an odd thing to put so much emphasis on, but rest assured, it gets weirder. You know how some authors go to excessive lengths to describe a female character's chest, to the point where her breasts are pretty much an extension of her personality and the focal point of every scene she's in? Yeah, that, only applied to a male character. While the rest of the group became acquainted, Maximilian stuck to the shadows, communicating only through grumbles and the occasional pectoral flex. My favorite quote has to be, "The chest of Maximilian shines in a tempting way while he's waiting to be approached." Oh, sorry. When nobody took the bait, Ben made an out-of-character remark towards his brother, very heavily implying that Cody, who was actually doing an alright job fitting in with the rest of the crew, should have been paying more attention to him. Cody complied, which Ben interpreted as an invitation to pretty much assume control of his precious Catgirl, describing how her eyes went wide when she noticed the sheen of Maximilian's smooth pecs. No, I'm not making this shit up. For the sake of everyone who had to witness two brothers pretending to awkwardly flirt with each other, all the while one of them was trying to do a squeaky schoolgirl voice, Loverboy decided that was quite enough bonding for the time being, and moved the campaign along, skipping to the newly formed squad of misfits descending down into the sewers. Overall, the actual gameplay portion proceeded as it usually had. Everybody played their role competently, and after fighting their way past droves of minor abominations, reached the hidden chamber where the ritual was being conducted. They easily slaughtered the cultists before they could fully summon their patron deity, which was teased as the eventual endgame boss for Chapter 1 of what was intended as a year-long campaign. Following the battle, Ben started to act as though his character was badly injured, despite him having sustained little to no damage during most of the encounters. He insisted that the group's physician, obviously another female character, look him over. Upon her begrudgingly inquiring about the injury, it was, of course, described in great detail as a large gash across Maximilian's strong, brawny, muscular, firm yet soft, rugged yet sensual, morally complex, character arc defining, and suspiciously perky man-teats. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. After a collective virtual eye roll by almost everyone involved, Maximilian was unceremoniously patched up and the group returned to their hideout for some downtime. It was Cody's turn in the limelight. With his older siblings still selling his character's injury, props for consistency at least, and retiring to his room, Cody was finally given the opportunity to shine. Remember how I mentioned that he had attempted to do a stereotypical squeaky anime girl voice before? Well, my man decided to double down and now exclusively spoke like that during every single interaction. Hey Catgirl, you want a drink? Now, please don't judge my stereotypical anime Catgirl voice.
Yeah, only if it's milk. And don't forget to put it in a bowl, ooh.
I can't even. Yes, it was as cringeworthy as it reads, and yes, it clashed with the overall bleak aesthetic of the setting. But having a fully grown man with a heavy Scottish accent trying to unironically sound cutesy was at least funny in an endearing sort of way, unlike Ben, who was just plain obnoxious. Speaking of whom, he would still occasionally interject and remind everyone that Maximilian was now slowly changing into his casual clothes. But, oops, he had forgotten to lock his bedroom's door. How awkward would it be if someone was to check up on him at that exact moment? Right, guys? Haha. No one ever did, by the way. As the campaign went on, Ben continued to find new ways of objectifying his beefcake. One of my favorite highlights of this time was when Maximilian was briefly reunited with his estranged sister. Before going their separate ways, she had given him their dead mother's earrings as a parting sentimental gift. Try and guess what he did with them. If you guessed use them as nipple piercings, then congratulations, you've been paying attention. In a weird way, I sort of admire his commitment to the trope. All that said, I wouldn't be writing this if it wasn't for what happened during the campaign's climax. Pun intended. Let's set the scene. In spite of the party's best efforts, the previously mentioned eldritch entity was finally summoned and unleashed upon the populace. Madness and bloodshed filled the streets. Our band of unlikely heroes had barricaded themselves at the abandoned inn, savoring their last moments of peace before having to confront the horrors that awaited beyond those walls. Everyone was gathered at the bar for one final shot of liquid courage. Suddenly, almost as if prompted to do so, our resident Catgirl excused herself and scurried off to the back. She was gone for quite a while, and the rest were already at the door, preparing for a grueling gauntlet of increasingly challenging encounters. When asked what his character was doing, Cody refused to outright state. Again, almost as if someone was telling him not to. Then, Maximilian undertook the initiative to go check on her, which was uncharacteristic in and of itself. It turned out that she had run off to pleasure herself one final time, and was now caught in the middle of the act by our moody duelist conveniently walking in on her. Upon being discovered, which was painfully staged, Cody went on to describe in great detail the exact pose he found her in, along with the object she had been using as an improvised sex toy. Ew. The stock of a flintlock, if you're curious. And no, I don't know why. Needless to say, everyone present was speechless. I mean, how do you prepare for something like that? The pair interpreted the stunned silence as encouragement, But just as Ben was presumably about to join in on the fun, Loverboy promptly interrupted the scene. He announced that they'd be taking a break for an hour or two, during which he dragged both the brothers into a private call and told them to keep stuff like that out of his game. Yes, the setting had some mature themes, but forcing everyone to listen as they graphically indulged each other's fetishes crossed more than a few lines. I'm not sure how I would have handled it personally. Maybe the more experienced DMs among you can share any similar experiences and how you would have dealt with them. Thankfully, the story was allowed to conclude almost as intended. The big bad monster was defeated and its surviving mind slaves liberated, even if the group had failed to liberate themselves in the end. Ben quit the server soon after. Cody stuck around for a while longer, but eventually quit as well. Loverboy quickly found replacements and they've been playing ever since. Some say that if you join voice chat at exactly 3 AM with your volume turned up, you can still hear the faint jingling of nipple rings. Anyway, hope you found this at least half as entertaining to read as it was to write. TLDR, two real-life brothers participate in a role-play-heavy campaign. One plays a brooding vampire obsessed with his man-tits, and the other a stereotypical catgirl he insists on authentically voicing. They get increasingly weird with each other until they get told off and afterwards quit the server. My goodness, that was quite the story. I had trouble keeping a straight face through the majority of that. Now, Ben was clearly the prime culprit here, as he seemed to be behind not only his own strange character moments, but also Cody's from behind the scenes. A lot of the stuff with Maximilian, while certainly cringy, wasn't really that bad on its own. In fact, I found some of it to be quite funny at times as a third party reading the story. But it's clear that's not what Ben was going for with the character. He was trying for more of an edgy sex symbol kind of thing, which was a huge swing and a miss. And it sounds like it always went too far and created a lot of uncomfortable situations for the rest of the players. Couple that with the obnoxious attitude he seemed to have and the more grim setting of the campaign, and you have a recipe for a lot of awkward moments in-game. Though, I will say I think it's fair play that a male character did get objectified the way a lot of female characters do, with a lot of emphasis and focus on the chest. And speaking of awkward, let's talk about Cody. From how the story is told, Cody seemed like he would have actually been a decent player if not for his brother's involvement. I mean, the Catgirl thing with the schoolgirl voice, that was a bit much. And look, you don't need to tell me, my Catgirl voice was super cringe. But aside from that, no one seemed to have any real issues with him when he was just doing his own thing. Unfortunately though, it sounds like he was easily influenced by his brother, which is a shame, and his role in all this is really what turns this into a horror story and not just an awkward experience. Even if prompted by Ben, he really should have known better than to graphically describe his character pleasuring themselves to everyone. Especially where it came essentially out of nowhere, and there didn't seem to be anything else in the game that was even close to making it seem like something like that would be acceptable. Maybe the nipple rings. Still, to do something like that in front of a group of friends who had not agreed to that kind of experience with seemingly the intention of going even further if the DM hadn't stopped them, makes Cody as culpable as his brother. Which is another thing. They were brothers, and they were about to play out something very uncomfortable. D&D isn't the place to play out your kinks or sexual fantasies unless it's something that everyone present has agreed to beforehand. Don't just drop it on a group of unsuspecting people, okay? And I don't know what kind of relationship Ben and Cody had, but if I could just give a small piece of advice, don't do something like this in general, but especially not with a family member. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Anyway, thank you everybody for checking out my video and sticking around till the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I upload new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so make sure you check out my channel for more D&D stories. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a goosebump in the comments below. The support is greatly appreciated. But until next time, be good players.